As a society, I just think it's so unacceptable that we've chosen not to care for people who are truly ill.
Civil commitment, it's not to be taken lightly.
Clearly, I was making decisions that put myself in harm's way.
How do we keep people from ever getting to that point?
On May 24th, dozens of Portland police officers rushed to the MAX stop at Cascade Station, not far from the Portland International Airport. Investigators would later explain how a man named Marcus Tate took 2 people hostage on the MAX train, armed with a knife and a barbecue skewer. After a standoff and negotiations with Tate, a special police unit fired 2 flashbang grenades, stunning Tate before taking him into custody and rescuing the hostages. Tate pleaded not guilty to multiple felony charges. But there's more to that story. Police officers had stopped Tate just the night before. They said he had a physical altercation with officers during an apparent mental health crisis. Officers took Tate to the hospital for a mental health evaluation. Then he was released the very next morning, just hours before the incident on the MAX train. Tate's situation is far from unique, and it highlights a mental health system with frustrating gaps, especially when someone needs urgent mental health care and refuses to voluntarily seek help. KGW analyzed court and government records. We found less than 7% of people in Multnomah County who were considered dangerous enough to warrant a forced mental health hold received a civil commitment ruling from a judge. Police also report that hundreds of times each year, they take someone to a hospital for mental health care only to later encounter them again, experiencing another apparent mental health crisis.
To get the person to the hospital and then to learn that they were released right away, it's also kind of underscores that the system is imperfect.
When a person refuses mental health care, doctors and evaluators are left with a tough question.
The investigator's not determining whether or not they need treatment, but whether or not we can force that person to get the treatment that's recommended.
Kathy Shoemate leads a team of behavioral health workers in Multnomah County. They're charged with investigating severe cases of mental illness to see if civil commitment is recommended or justified.
And the idea is that if you're experiencing severe symptoms of your mental illness, then your judgment about your behavior and what you need to do is impaired. Were it not impaired, you might make different choices.
The civil commitment process is complicated, but here's an overview of how it works. A person experiencing an apparent mental health crisis may be placed on a temporary hold, often by a behavioral health worker or a police officer. Then, a doctor evaluates to see if that person meets standards for an involuntary hold. If they do, the doctor issues a notice of mental illness, or NMI. County investigators have 3 days to review the medical assessment. If they agree with the NMI, a court hearing is scheduled. Then a judge decides if that person meets the legal criteria for civil commitment, which could mean up to 6 months of forced care in a medical facility. If at any point in the process the person agrees to voluntary treatment, they're released from the hold. The key here is the high standard for civil commitment. In Oregon and Washington, evaluators must judge that a person's mental illness makes them dangerous to themselves or others.
There's a reason the bar and the threshold is so high as it is.
Civil liberties are important. It shouldn't be easy to commit someone.
Casey Lewis, working with Disability Rights Oregon, says holding someone against their will is normally only used when someone's committed a crime, not when they're ill.
The standards for civil commitment should be high because people with mental illness belong in their communities. I think the fact that so few people end up committed is a sign that the threshold is appropriate.
It wasn't always this way. Current standards are reflective of a decades-long shift away from state institutionalism for mental health treatment. In 1963, President John F. Kennedy introduced and signed the Community Mental Health Act into law. He said people with mental illness must not be alien to our affections and apart from our community.
Our chief aim is to get people out of state custodial institutions and back into their communities and homes without hardship or danger.
A year earlier, Ken Kesey's novel One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was published, criticizing mental health treatment. The book was set in an Oregon psychiatric hospital. Over the decades to come, states adopted new civil commitment laws and shifted responsibility from state hospitals to counties. Data from the State Library of Oregon shows there were more than 5,000 beds in use in state mental hospitals in 1954. 30 years later, only 30% of those beds remained. Since 2002, Oregon has had about 700 beds available for state psychiatric use. And now, the Oregon State Hospital rarely houses civil commitment patients. In 2019, OSH shifted admission priorities to focus on people awaiting criminal trials. For example, people who are guilty except for insanity. For more than a year, the state hospital has averaged less than 20 civil commitment patients per month, forcing local hospitals to provide long-term care.
This shift in treatment is one thing, but the reality is the vast majority of people don't come anywhere close to civil commitment. Many people don't meet state standards for being a danger to themselves or others, so they're released from care, still experiencing significant symptoms of their mental illness. Could that then lead to a cycle where you're seeing some of these issues pop up again and again?
It can. It can.
Isn't that frustrating?
It's very frustrating.
Brenda Gardner says in the case of her son Eric, her family ran out of options for help.
A lot of the problem is that the laws were changed so that their civil rights are what is all important, and their safety is not.
Gone too far that direction.
Way too far that direction.
If someone refuses treatment, housing, or help, she says we've accepted a system that fails to help people when they need it.
But as far as I'm concerned, the homeless situation is an open-air psych ward. It's those people that should be in psychiatric facilities or in supported housing with a caseworker that checks on them, are instead living on the streets and being treated like animals.